Child Development Specialist here at Lamp Early On. This week we're going to be looking at part 2 of the IEP process and the IPRC process. So keeping in mind that everything I am saying is through the lens of the Toronto District School Board or the TDSB. I recommend that if you are going through this process in a different school board, there's plenty of information on the school board's website that you can look at. The names might differ, the process might look a little different. So always speak to the principal or the teacher in the school that you are in, or you can always look everything up. But let's just get started. Before we begin talking about the IEP process and the IPRC process, let's take a more in-depth look at some kindergarten readiness checklist. This checklist is very important because this will determine what you will be asking for in your child's IEP, because the school will really only care and focus on the skills that your child has in order to be successful in school. So we're going to take a look at a school readiness checklist for kindergartners. So some things that will take place in a school day, and again, this was before COVID, so obviously things will differ and look a little bit different in a classroom this time, but mainly they'll be throwing and catching balls, using playground equipment, coming in from outside when being asked, or at this point wearing a mask when asked, playing cooperatively with other children if they're doing in-person learning, waiting for their turn, following classroom rules, helping others, sharing toys, listening to the teacher, following directions, staying seated in their chair or in front of the computer, sitting quietly when asked, changing activities from one to the next with ease, sharing stories, news, or ideas with the group, doing show and tell, singing songs, doing the actions to the songs, drawing simple pictures, holding crayons or markers, cutting paper, gluing crafts, tidying up, looking at books, labeling pictures, copying letters, recognizing the letters of their own name, feeding themselves, using the washroom, riding the school bus if they are far enough, and dressing themselves, so getting their coats on and off and putting on their shoes by themselves, as well as being able to identify 6 body parts on a doll picture by the time they're 5 years old, and stacking rings in order, completing a 3 or 4 piece puzzle, matching primary colors, which are red, blue, and yellow, being able to identify those primary colors, matching circles, squares, triangles, being able to name or to point to at least 20 objects or pictures when asked. They're able to listen to stories, name actions when looking at the book, again, matching letters, identifying their own name when it's printed, and they can be able to rote count to 3, short shape, size, and length, identify and count quantities of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is just some of the things to look for when you are preparing your child for kindergarten. So even if your child is in an older grade, some things when you're going through the IEP process to ask yourself would be to ask yourself or to ask the school, the teacher, are: how is my child doing in class? Are they listening? What are you doing to help my child? What strategies are working? When does my child struggle? What is not working? What are the consequences? What are the benefits? Can they follow the program? What do they enjoy? What are my child's strengths? What is difficult for them? What are my child's needs in the class, and how are they being met? As well as, is there any way that I can help at home? So these are all very important questions to ask not only yourself, but to the teacher, to the principal, to your child's support team as well. So now let's actually get into the IEP. So in last week's video, we touched upon some of the terminology that you're going to use. Today, we are going to take a deeper look into IEPs and the IPRC. So the Individual Education Plan, or the IEP, is a written plan that identifies the student's specific learning expectations and outlines how the school will address these expectations through appropriate accommodations, program modifications, and or alternative programs, as well as specific instructional and assessment strategies. So everything that I'm going to be saying in this video will apply to the Toronto District School Board, or the TDSB, and some of the information will still be the same throughout Ontario. The names might be a little bit different, or the process might be a little bit different depending on your school board. So I highly encourage you to talk to the principal or the teacher of your school. So the IEP may also identify specific measurable learning expectations that are modified from or alternated to the expectations given in the curriculum policy for the grade level subject or course. In developing or reviewing your child's IEP, consideration must be given to any recommendations made by the IPRC concerning special education programs and services that may be particularly appropriate for meeting your child's needs. The IEP must be developed in consultation with you, the parents or guardian. It must include accommodations, which are strategies and supports that differ from what is normally provided during instruction, appropriately specific and measurable educational expectations, an outline of the special education program and services that will be received, a statement about the methods for reviewing your child's progress, as well as a personalized transition plan with specific goals and actions that build on your child's strengths, needs, and required supports. If your child does not need a transition plan, the plan will have to state that no action is required. The IEP must be completed within 30 school days after your child has been placed in a special education program. As well, the principal must ensure that parents receive a copy of it. An IEP can also be developed for students who don't have formally identified as exceptional but who require special education programs and or services. For those that have not been identified by the IPRC as an exceptional student, you should talk to your principal or your teacher about acquiring an IEP for your child, and you should also do this in writing. Whatever you do everything in writing as well as talk to them. So what is an exceptional pupil? The Education Act defines as an exceptional pupil as a student whose behavioral, communicational, intellectual, physical, or multiple exceptionalities are such that they are considered to need placement in a special education program. Students are identified through the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, the IPRC process, according to the categories and definitions of exceptionalities provided through the Ministry of Education. So what is the IPRC, or the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee? Keeping in mind that you will only have access to the IPRC once your child is in school. So you will not be able to request the IPRC if your child is new to the school board or if they're going into kindergarten for the first time in the fall. However, if your child is already in the school system, in the school board, then they can request the IPRC. Again, keeping in mind that every school board might look a little bit different. This is the process for the TDSB. So the IPRC, if students are being considered for identification of an exceptionality and special education programs and or services, it will go through the IPRC. The IPRC will decide whether or not your child should be identified as an exceptional pupil, identify the areas of your child's exceptionality, according to the categories and definitions of exceptionalities provided by the Ministry of Education. They will also decide an appropriate placement for your child, which can include either a mainstream class with indirect support, resource assistance, or a withdrawal assistance. Special education class with partial integration or full-time. They will also review the identification and placement at least once in every school year. So how can you as the parent or guardian have an IPRC meeting requested for your child? Again, your child has to be already in the school board system or going into school already, but you can request an IPRC through your principal of your child's school, and you have to do it in writing. Or the principal can request it as well on your behalf. So the principal may, in consultation with the school support team or the SST, and with written notice from you, refer your child to an IPRC when the principal believes that your child may benefit from a special education program. You must request an IPRC meeting for your child upon receiving your written request. So again, it has to be a written request. So within 15 days of receiving your written request or giving you notice, the principal must also provide you with a copy of a guide and a written statement of approximately when the IPRC will meet. Any educational and psychological assessment that they deem might be worthy will also be requested around this time if your child doesn't already have one. And then as well, within those 15 days, 10 school days before your meeting, the IPRC will actually give you an invitation. So when we say 15 days or 30 days, we're talking about 15 school days. So Monday to Friday. March break doesn't count. The long weekends that when your child is off doesn't count. PA days do not count. Weekends and summer does not count as well. This is all very important to know, because if you want an IPRC or an IEP to be put in place for your child for the following year and your child's in school, you need to do all of this now. So that way they have time to put everything in place. They can work throughout the summer to have everything in place for you as well, if that is the decision that they make. So what information will you receive about your meeting? So again, like I mentioned, within the 15 school days of giving you notice of an IPRC or receiving your request, the principal will provide you with written notification of approximately when the IPRC will meet. Around 10 school days in advance of the meeting, you will receive the actual invitation to attend the meeting. This letter will notify you of the date, the time, and the place of meeting, and it will ask you to indicate whether or not you will attend. Before the IPRC meeting occurs, you will receive a written copy of any information about your child that the members of the IPRC have received. This can also include results of assessments or summary of any information that they receive. So who can actually attend the IPRC meeting? So like I mentioned in last week's video, the IPRC is consisted of at least 3 people on this committee, It is highly recommended that you as the parent attend because you can advocate. You can also bring along with you someone to help support you or to help take notes. The principal or the vice principal of your child's school will also attend. And then you can also request the following people. Like I mentioned, your representative or your support person that can speak on behalf of you and or your child. Other resource people who may provide additional information or clarification of your child, such as your child's teacher, special education staff, a representative of an agency that you and your child work with. As well, if you need a translator or an interpreter, you can always request one, and you will request one through the principal of your child's school. So what actually happens in these meetings? Again, this might change a little bit because of COVID. Probably things are all through Zoom, so it may or may not look a little bit differently, but traditionally what happens in these meetings is that everybody introduces themselves, and then the IPRC will review all available information about your child. They will consider the educational assessment and the health or psychological assessments if they have a copy of this. If they feel it will be useful, they may also interview your child with your permission if your child is under the age of 16. They will also consider any information that you have submitted about your child as well. You are encouraged to ask questions during this meeting and to participate in any discussion. And you can always ask the questions, those prompting questions that I had mentioned closer to the beginning of this video. So once all of the information has been presented and discussed, the committee will make its decision, and the decision will include whether or not your child can be considered an exceptional student or pupil. If they are considered an exceptional pupil, what is the category and the definition of the exceptionality? What are the strengths and needs of your child? The placement of your child as well. The IPRC will recommend placement in either a mainstream classroom with special education services if, in their opinion, such a placement meets the student's needs and is consistent with your preferences. And also keep in mind that while the IPRC will consider your preferences, these preferences are not binding, and the final decision about placement will belong to the IPRC. The IPRC will also give recommendations regarding a special education program and services, as well, where it's appropriate, the reasons for placing your child in an education class. So what will the IPRC consider in making its decisions about exceptionalities? They will consider all of the documents that they have received from your various sources that you submitted, as well as the schools. But what will the IPRC consider in making its placement decisions? So before the IPRC can consider placing your child in a special education class, it must consider whether placement in a mainstream class with appropriate special education services will meet your child's needs and be consistent with your preferences. If, after considering all of these information, the IPRC is satisfied with the placement in a mainstream class, will meet your child's needs, and that such a decision is consistent with your preferences, the committee will decide in favor of placement in a mainstream class with appropriate special education services. So what happens after the IPRC has made its decision? The chair of the IPRC will sign a statement of decision and review it with you. And the statement of decision will include the description of your child's strengths and needs, whether the IPRC has identified your child as exceptional, if it has identified your child as exceptional, Categories and definitions of any exceptionalities will be identified. Their placement decision, recommendations regarding special education program and services, and the reasons for that decision. If you agree with the identification and placement decisions made by the IPRC, you will be asked to indicate this by signing on the statement of decision. It may be signed at the meeting, or you can take it home and return it later to your principal. No committee placement decision can be implemented unless you have either A, consented to the decision, or B, unless the time limit for filing a notice of appeal about the decision has expired. The chair of the IPRC will sign the statement and will review all of this information with you. So if you have any questions during that time, you should ask the chair your questions and they can appropriately help you. Now, what happens if you disagree with the IPRC's decision? Well, you have 15 school days to request a second meeting of the IPRC. If after your second meeting you are dissatisfied, you have an additional 15 school days from the second decision to file an appeal. You can also file within 30 school days an appeal as well. Your request for an appeal must be made in writing. And for the Toronto District School Board, you will contact the director and secretary treasurer. You can find all this information online on the TDSB website. There's also a link down below as well. So in your letter of request to appeal, you must indicate the decision with which you disagree on and your reasons for disagreeing. If you do not make an appeal within 30 days or request a second meeting within 15 days, then the IPRC will automatically be implemented after those 30 school days. So, what happens if you've gone through the IPRC and you actually agree to all of the conditions the IPRC have set? Once a child has been placed, then a review IPRC meeting will be held within the school year, at least once a school year, unless the principal of the school is being provided, receives written notice from you, the parent, where you request a review a little bit earlier. A request for a review IPRC meeting may be made at any point in time after your child has been in the program for at least 3 months. So what does the review IPRC consider and decide? The review IPRC will consider the same kinds of information as the IPRC. It will also consider the progress your child has been making in this program, and with your written permission will reference the IEP. The IPRC will review the placement and identification decisions and decide whether they should be continued or whether a different decision should now be made. And your IEP will also be written up within 30 days of your child being placed in an education program. So now, what happens if your child has complex needs and is not in the school board yet? So you won't be able to request an IPRC committee meeting. However, you are able to request an SEPRC meeting, or Special Education Program Recommendation Committee. It's also known as the Special Education Review Committee. So these are for families who are either entering kindergarten for the first time in the fall, or they're moving from one school board to another school board. So you will request an SEPRC, which is when students are new to the TDSB with extremely complex medical needs, can be considered for immediate placement in an intensive support special education program. Usually, these are children who have been receiving intensive full-time education class supports in other school systems or daycares prior to their arrival in the TDSB. To address this delay that they don't want your child to have to get an IPRC, this committee had formed. So how do you request it and what should you do? The principal will consult with the inclusion consultant after you have expressed your concerns as you are signing your child up to kindergarten. So just like the IPRC and just like the IEP, you need to talk to the principal as well as write a letter to your principal about the needs that your child has, and they will go from there. Again, the earlier in the school that you do it, the more likely that these will be in place for your child once school starts again in September. So the principal will consult with the inclusion consultant to review any documents or medical documents shared by you to confirm if a referral to the SEPRC is appropriate and to consider your child for possible special education class placement. When you decline participation in an SEPRC, you do not forego your right to request an IPRC. When parents agree to participate in an SEPRC, you can still decline a recommended placement and have your child attend the neighborhood school. So the steps to get an SEPRC referral is to obviously pre-register your student, your child in your home school, and share any educational, behavioral, medical or health, such as hearing, vision, physical, neurological, psychological, speech and language, occupational or physiotherapy assessments, or any other relevant documents that addresses the medically complex needs of your child with the principal the day that you sign up for kindergarten or transferring school boards. The principal will explore the opportunity for the SEPRC with a special education consultant if the parents support the possibility of special education class placement immediately upon enrollment and would like an SEPRC meeting to be considered. Parents can decline an SEPRC and their child will attend the home school. Documentations that you should provide so that it can be presented to the SEPRC almost mirrors the required for if you're going through the IPRC placement, which could include educational assessments, as well as report cards if that's applicable, any IEPs that you've had in the past if your child went to daycare and they provided you with an IEP, a psychological assessment, and any other relevant professional assessments like speech and language assessment, OT or PT, medical, as well as a developmental history form. And that's really for junior kindergarten to about grade 2. And as well as a current professional observations and any work samples that you have of your child, as well as any other documents you as the parent or caregiver may deem relevant. So while you are at this meeting, unlike the IPRC, where you had the option of going or not going to the IPRC, because your child is not yet a student in the school board, you as the parent or caregiver have to be present in this meeting for it to proceed. Other people that you can have in this meeting, again, is the principal from the referring school or your home school. Any interpreters or translators that you've requested through the principal of your home school. An administrator from the referring school also must attend to provide a general overview. Parents are also encouraged to invite, again, your support person. And you can also invite any professionals to discuss the student that can determine your child's strengths, needs, academic performance, and presenting issues. So just like I mentioned at the very beginning, going through this process, you have to focus on the needs that your child will have in the classroom and how it can affect them academically. So things like concentration and self-regulation, you're going to have to word it in a way that will make it look like they need it for school and for academic purposes. So if you've gone through all this and you accept everything, they will, and they've made a decision, they can place your child in a school where special education class is located, and a referral for the follow-up IPRC meeting will also have to be done still, but your child will have to be in the school for at least 6 to 9 months before you can request an IPRC meeting. An exception to the 6 to 9 month rule involves students in kindergarten intensive support programs. Students in junior kindergarten will have their program recommendation reevaluated in the spring in the school support team meeting or the SST meeting to determine if the recommended full-time support should continue for senior kindergarten and have an IPRC during their final kindergarten year in preparation for grade 1. So for the SEPRC, there is no formal appeal process. Students under considerations of the SEPRC are not yet attending the school, so therefore it does not provide a decision about exceptionality and can only make a recommendation about conditional placement in special education classes. So you are free to not accept it if you choose not to, and then you can always apply for the IPRC process again within the 6 to 9 months. So what are the main differences between the SEPRC process and the IPRC process? Well, for one, the SEPRC process is not based on ministry regulations. Again, this is a TDSB committee that has developed. Other school boards might either look a little bit different, have a different name. So again, contacting your principal or talking to the principal or the teacher in the school is always recommended. As well, a student may only be referred to an SEPRC by the decision of the homeschool principal in consultation with parents and members of the school support team. So unlike the IPRC, where the IPRC can be brought up with a written parent letter. The SEPRC meeting cannot go ahead if parents don't want one or do not attend. Unlike the IPRC, you can either attend or not to attend, but I always recommend attending. But the SEPRC, the meeting will not happen if you do not attend. As well, no decisions about exceptionalities and placements are made in the SEPRC meetings, only a program recommendation. As well, parents may decline the recommendations of the SEPRC, but you cannot appeal them. Instead, you can request an IPRC once your child is attending school. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found the information useful. If you need help going through the process, or if you have any questions or concerns around this topic or any other child development topic, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is always in the description box below, and I will see you all next week. Bye!